melatonin is a fantastic supplement for lots of kids' health issues. I know there are people out there saying, don't give it to adults, don't give it to kids, but those people have not bothered to read any of the literature. They've picked up one point, focused on it, and they've got it totally wrong. And I'll explain it, but it's used extensively around hospitals in the world for lots of conditions, which I'll highlight later. But it's also used extensively around the world for kids outside of hospitals for treatments, sleep issues, ADHD, autism, you name it. There are so many uses of melatonin and so many benefits. So what is the big issue? Well, first of all, people, as I said, they find one little thing, oh, well, that's going to be a problem. I'm going to really raise that issue. And I want to go through that and debunk it. And I've read thousands of studies on melatonin. And in the last couple of weeks, I've read hundreds of studies on kids and melatonin. Let's start off, first of all. In most cases, the supplements for kids is usually around 3 to 10 milligrams per day. In terms of its general safety, people say, well, if it's a hormone, it's a bit like vitamin E, the opposite to vitamin D, daylight, nighttime. So it's a little bit like vitamin D, and they think, well, if you overdose on it, is it going to set up these feedback loops so your body stops producing? So your body produces melatonin in the pineal gland and 100 times more throughout the rest of your body, in the skin, in your gut, in your organs, particularly in your muscles, in your brain. It's critical for brain development, absolutely critical for healthy brain development of neuroplasticity. And as you'll see from one of the other videos I've just done on Alzheimer's, great for treatment of Alzheimer's, where they're using it extensively. But we're looking at kids this time. And so there is no feedback loop. In other words, if you take it, it breaks down in the body so quickly, it gets to do a couple of runs around the body, gets broken down, and then it doesn't stop your body producing any more melatonin. It doesn't say, well, you've got too much melatonin. So if you take testosterone, for example, which you've all heard of, your testosterone receptors say, oops, we've got heaps of testosterone, don't produce any more. And that's a big problem with testosterone. But that doesn't happen with melatonin. Because it breaks down, because it doesn't influence any of the feedback loops, it means that you can take it and your body still produces it in all of your cells, all of your mitochondria, in your neurons and in your pineal gland, so to help you get to sleep. So it doesn't have a feedback loop. Second of all, it doesn't accumulate. There are lots of things out there that can accumulate. For example, fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin D, vitamin A, vitamin E can actually accumulate, which is one of the reasons why I want to tell you that melatonin is significantly safer, first of all, than all of the pharmaceuticals out there. And it surprises me sometimes when people say, oh, hold on, melatonin, but they give their kids paracetamol, aspirin, every 3 months they go to a doctor and get antibiotics. 10% of the kids over this age are on antidepressants, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which have serious and deadly consequences. There's this contradiction out there. So my message is really simple. It's incredibly safe. It doesn't accumulate. It gets broken down very, very quickly in the liver and a few other places around the body, but primarily in the liver. So when you take a dose, it goes into your gut, into your blood, straight to your liver, starts to break down, goes round once or twice, gets broken down once or twice again, and it's literally broken down within a couple of hours. It's totally eliminated out of your body within a couple of hours. So it doesn't accumulate. Now, when it comes to the toxicity of it, if you look at the acute toxicity, now that's what does it take to actually poison someone? Well, they did some studies and they really had to up the dose, and they had something like 400 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. So remember, this is done on mice and rats, and so they have to expand it up there. And you have to bear in mind that the average dose here is 3 to 10 milligrams. And here we're talking, if you up that 400 milligrams per kilogram for a 70 kilogram person, that's 28,000 milligrams a person would have to take in a single dose to have an acute toxic effect. Wow. That's a lot, isn't it? That's like a huge ball of melatonin, and then the acute toxic effect may not, well, probably not kill you because you'll be vomiting and sick as a result of it. My message is it's so much safer than so many of the other issues out there, other supplements out there, and pharmaceuticals out there. Oh, I can give you an example. Taking iron supplements and calcium supplements causes significantly more damage out there. And when you come to all of the studies on kids specifically, they show hundreds of kids study extremely low toxicity, extremely low toxicity. In fact, if I read a couple of the comments, and these are reviews where they've actually looked at the toxicity for kids after reviewing dozens and dozens of studies, and it typically comes back without any serious side effects, no reported adverse side effects. And in one cases where they estimated there are something like 35 million individual doses given out there, no serious adverse side effects. So what are the side effects? Well, the first one, and this goes on and on and on, and I'll put a link to those studies in there so you can check them and verify them. Unlike these other people who say it's deadly for you, well, the side effects of melatonin tend to be a little bit more grogginess, sleepiness, drowsiness, maybe a little bit of nausea, which is extremely rare, but usually relating to more feeling a tired, occasionally headache. But a lot of these can be altered with changing the dosage, which is what they find in the studies. So there are lots of ways of dealing with it, and they're the worst side effect. However, there was another side effect a very reputable person highlighted, and it was to do with puberty. Oh no, it delays puberty. Well, the studies, all of the big studies I've ever seen have denied that. There's a couple of animal studies that suggest it might delay puberty. However, what's great about this idea is that we're actually going through a phase, what's called precocious puberty. All the studies on the animals were looking at animals that have brought forward their pubertal, is that the correct word? Doesn't matter, stage. So they're going through puberty 1, 2, 3 years. In terms of humans, puberty used to be in the 15s and 16s for girls. It's now in the 10s, 11s, even younger, 12-year-olds. What's brought this on? A whole raft of issues, which I will deal with in another video. And this pre-puberty, this precocious puberty, has serious and deadly side effects. So what it's doing is actually reversing, if it does do it, it's reversing it a little bit towards the positive end and slowing down. An early onset puberty leads to things like increased risk in breast cancer, polycystic ovarian syndrome, a whole raft of dysmenorrhea, disturbances in the menstrual cycle of girls and women, a whole raft of these other conditions as a result of it. And we're seeing this going on, and scientists are actually saying, well, you need to stop this and reverse it, and melatonin, if it does, may do that. So when somebody says it might delay puberty, go, yay! That's what we're after, because that's the best outcome you could possibly imagine. So precocious puberty, basically humans, no effects, and it's increasingly used in hospitals around the world. So where and what does it do? What is melatonin? Melatonin is a neurohormone or a hormone in the body, and it controls lots of actions in there. Most people think that it's just to do with sleep, and it's not. Don't worry, we're going to get on to lots of the issues about the particular conditions where it's beneficial for kids. But when it comes to sleep, there is nothing that compares to it, the safety of it, and it has huge benefit in sleep. But getting back here, it controls a biological rhythm. So the first one is a 24-hour one called the circadian rhythm, the monthly rhythm, which is a relatively recent finding and understanding whereby it actually helps establish the time of puberty and the regularity of puberty, which is why a lot of younger women now are taking melatonin, because it helps with PCOS and dysmenorrhea. So you get the idea. Oh, by the way, I have some videos on those already. So check out those videos and you'll see how important it is. But it also helps with the cell cycles, the actual cycle of the cell, reproducing, growing, expanding, dying. All those things are controlled or at least regulated a little bit by melatonin and the melatonin processes. So it has this huge diversity. And then, as we've already highlighted, puberty. Now, it's also critical in terms of neurodevelopment. The development of the of all your neurons in the fetus. So when a woman's pregnant and she's got that young developing fetus, the brain is influenced by her melatonin levels. And her melatonin levels, which by the way in this case is probably about getting a good night's sleep to get the right melatonin levels, ensure that the brain development, the various aspects of the neuronal development, the synapses and all the mechanisms in a healthy brain are set up, and melatonin has a huge role to do with that right through to adolescence. That's why, by the way, so the fetus, birthing, infant, and then adolescence. That's why the highest levels of melatonin are in those first 12 years. And then, unfortunately, folks, they decline. So by the time you get to my age, there's this much melatonin coming from my pineal gland. Fortunately, I stimulate the production throughout my body and I supplement with it. So in terms of the development of your neurons and also protecting your neurons. So when damage is done, whether it's from stress or injury, toxic chemicals, anything like that, and there are lots of toxic chemicals now, whether it's COVID, even viruses, all of that damage occurs in the brain, and melatonin is able to help repair that or continue the repair process. Which, by the way, which is why melatonin is seen as one of the best things for post-COVID and post-vaccination syndrome. So you can see how important this is. So coming back here, and it occurs, most of this improvement or repairing of the brain actually occurs at nighttime when you're asleep. So we know as we age and we start to have certain damage show up in our brain, like beta amyloid plaques and tau proteins that accumulate in our brain, sleep time is when they actually eliminate those, and melatonin has a major role of those. So the deeper, the better you sleep, the better it is. Now, hold on. Most kids don't really sleep well, do they? And we'll come on to that in a moment. And then it's a potent antioxidant. It's a potent antioxidant. It's twice as strong as vitamin E, which is a great antioxidant. It's both water soluble and mixes with fat, so it can travel literally all through the cells in the body, which just means it's incredibly flexible in terms of that. But also it helps generate your other antioxidant system. So your body already has a set of antioxidant systems in your body, enzymes, that is stimulated based on various factors. One of those is melatonin. So melatonin stimulates something called superoxide dismutase, glutathione, peroxidase, and catalase, which are all these antioxidant enzyme systems. So it has a double whammy of antioxidant effect that alters different aspects of getting rid of those nasty free radicals. Those nasty free radicals which cause all the damage and lower inflammation. Now that's just a really brief summary of what it does. And then you look at, why do we need melatonin for kids then? Well, first of all, there are lots of things I call melatonin killers. And unfortunately, they are now ubiquitous and rampant in our society. If we look at some of them, poor sleep. When you don't sleep at night properly, you are not able to produce the melatonin. See, melatonin is used to help to get to sleep, but if you don't sleep properly, you don't produce the melatonin. And so poor sleep, disruptive sleep, and this may be right through from an infant. By the way, infants start producing melatonin at around about 3 months or so. Prior to that, it's all coming from breast milk, human milk. That's why having a formula before 3 months is going to play havoc with the baby's sleep. A little bit of trivia out there. So coming back here, poor sleep, whether you're a baby, a child, or an infant, or an adult. Blue light, and this is all the screen light and so on, the videos, the phones, the tablets and so on, all emitting blue light, the computer emitting blue light. Whenever you do that, it actually slows down or stops your body's ability, your pineal gland in this case, to produce melatonin. And that's also electromagnetic frequency. So the actual mobile phone held to your ear is destroying your body's ability to produce melatonin, put it in a simple way. Not enough daylight. Having the daylight, going out into the sun and getting some daylight, actually helps stimulate the production at nighttime, which is a great idea. So you go out and get some sunlight. And if you're not getting sunlight because you're stuck indoors, which we all are, then you're not getting the initial stimulus of the light to produce the melatonin at nighttime. So it preps it all and gets your body. Stress is another one. Poor diet. Now, when it comes to poor diet, the first aspect is you need certain nutrients, e.g. an amino acid called tryptophan, to produce serotonin, then melatonin. You need literally tryptophan to produce this cycle getting to melatonin. And if you don't have the tryptophan, you're not eating the right type of foods, and we'll talk about that in another video, and you're eating highly processed foods, you're not getting it, therefore you can't produce it. Oh, really? And as I already hinted, it's linked in with the serotonin cycle. So what do? We'll take a drug to stimulate the cycle of serotonin to help people with depression and anxiety, rather than changing their diet and looking at this whole production, the biochemistry of it. So interesting. So coming back, nutrition, and then you got things that kill it, and glucose and high glycemic control. So feeding kids, infants, any sugary foods is changing the body's ability of that infant, of that baby, of that child, and adults, of course, to be able to produce the melatonin and then have the sleep and have all these other benefits that I've mentioned here. So glycemic control, your blood sugar spikes and all the ups and downs and so on, which is why diabetics traditionally are linked with poor sleep, and poor sleep is linked with Alzheimer's later on in life. A good reason to actually watch my video on Alzheimer's and melatonin. But then we've got late night feeding. We've got these various clocks in the body, which I've already highlighted at. And all of these clocks, the sunlight clock, so when we get sunlight, it resets our circadian rhythm. When we eat big meals, small meals, and so on, it sets our digestive rhythm and feeds into our circadian rhythm, and therefore alters the melatonin production. And then finally, one that's very common is a sedentary lifestyle. If your child is not getting up, getting around and running around, and I've got a 2.5-year-old grandson, I've got a couple of granddaughters, but a couple of 2.5-year-old, and he is just running out and is outside all the time. So it's resetting his literally circadian rhythm and melatonin production. So all of these factors, and many, many more, which I'll cover in another video, show you why kids nowadays are short on melatonin, and links in with many of the other factors in there to do with lots of health conditions in kids and infants. If we just start with one condition that everybody is aware of, autism spectrum disorder, and the sheer rates at which it has gone up over the last couple of decades. Now, there are lots and lots of factors in there. And of course, by the way, I've been involved with this since the 1990s, because we used to run specialty seminars for children's health and well-being. And we had such a great response back then. In fact, I wrote a book called The Deal for Happier, Healthier Kids, which talks a lot about ASD. But when we come back to it, what we do know is that autism spectrum disorder and many of these conditions are linked with oxidation, inflammation, in this case, neuroinflammation, which I've already mentioned, and mitochondrial dysfunction. There is no discussion, debate. We know that. Now, there are many factors that can contribute to that. And one of those is, of course, low melatonin levels. And I've already highlighted the melatonin killers, but if I put it in perspective for preschool aged kids, 1 hour before bedtime, 1 hour before bedtime, ends up with an 86% reduction in melatonin levels. 50% below the normal exposure level. These children, these kids, are highly sensitive to light exposure 1 hour before bed. And what are they doing? Well, they're up, the lights are on, some are sleeping with the lights, and some of them have their phones and their iPads and their computers in front of them an hour before. No, we've got to get rid of that. See, this is really a big issue because of the last 100 years, last 60 years, and the growth of all this equipment and light. So moving on, we've got all these conditions that link to it. And what we know in autism spectrum disorder is they have abnormal levels of melatonin production. Any wonder? And there are factors in there right through from the developing fetus to being breastfed, a whole raft of conditions that can lead to that, as well as all those other killers that I mentioned. Melatonin levels are abnormal, the circadian rhythms are abnormal, and pineal gland structure, morphology, and function is abnormal. And this is occurring in virtually every child with autism spectrum disorder. And as a result, we see poor sleep. Poor sleep, in fact, is related to about 80% of kids with ASD have poor sleep, 80% or more. Now, the first thing you're going to think of is, wow, that's what melatonin is known for. One of the things that's fantastic for is sleep. So you can see already where it's going to help. And of course, I wanted to put in here about 80% of the kids with ASD also have gut-related issues, and sleep and gut is a two-way street. Good sleep helps build a healthy gut microbiome. A healthy gut microbiome helps build good sleep. So when we look at the studies to do with melatonin and autism, we see overwhelmingly, the researchers, not the pharmaceutical companies and the doctors that are paid by them, the researchers are saying it is extremely safe. And we come here, and this is first of all on the mice. And when they look at the mouse model of autism, and we find they have a decrease in sleep-wake disorders. So when the mice are treated, so they've got the equivalent of human autism, as soon as you give them melatonin, they start to fix up their sleep-wake disorders. They decrease in autism-like symptoms and behaviours. Wow, that's pretty good. But let's now look at the human state. And there are dozens and dozens of these studies, all showing variations of the same theme, that it works extremely well. But you can't rely just on the animal tests, the animal models. So we move to the human studies, and they've been done literally for the last 30 or more years. I should point out that melatonin and serotonin supplements were actually used prior to all the antidepressant drugs. In fact, I think they were banned about the same year that the antidepressant drugs come out in the 1990s. Anyway, coming back to here, what we find, a little bit of politics there, children. In a 2020 study, 80 children to adolescents, 2 to 17 years of age. The study went for 3 months, so a pretty long study. 2 to 10 milligrams in the variation combinations. It improved sleep, the caregiver satisfaction, so the parents and the caregivers said, wow, the child's behaving and all the conditions are a lot better, so I can contribute and care even better. Quality of life was improved in the child, and no observed effects on growth or puberty or serious adverse effects. So that's one study that was done there. And again, remember, there are dozens of these studies. And you're wondering why you haven't heard about this, haven't you? Then in a 2020 review, and every couple of years you get a good review where they look at the best studies, they pull them together and say, so what are the outcomes? Now, unfortunately, I couldn't find one for 2025 yet, but maybe if I searched a bit, if I find one, I'll post up the link anyway. So in a 2020 review, they found, and this went from 8 to 52 weeks, so they looked at various 10 or so different studies and put them together, and age 2 to 18 years of children who have ASD. There was an improvement in sleep duration and sleep latency onset. In other words, it took less time for them to get to sleep at night, and they had improved sleep. I should put in that there was a quote in there, and there's a quote pretty well in all of these studies. Melatonin is well tolerated and safe. That's a quote directly out of one of the papers. But of any of the links I will show you, you follow it through, you'll see that they're all saying exactly the same. This was another study, meta-analysis again, a higher quality study, 2023, and they looked at 15 of the dozens and dozens, over 100 studies. They looked at 15 of over 100 studies or more, and they picked the best ones, and they found it increased the total sleep time, increased the sleep latency, longer sleeping, and it increased sleep efficiency. So all the parameters measured around sleep improved, and all it was a melatonin supplement. And then finally, this is a slightly different one, so I thought I'd put it up. And in this one, it shows you a different outcome as a result of the different dosage. And so in the 2020 study, 196 ASD kids, sleep onset latency with 1 milligram was 22 minutes less. In other words, the time it took for them to get to sleep. On the 1 milligram, it was 22 minutes. On the 4 milligram, it was 28 minutes, minus 28 minutes. In other words, the 4 milligram one showed that it took them, they got to sleep a lot quicker as a result of it. Just a little bit difference from the 1 milligram, but a big improvement. That's a minus in here, so you can understand why. With all that in mind, then you say, well, why haven't we been informed about this? Why haven't we said? Well, the alternative is you go to the pharmaceutical drugs, and you've got androgenic drugs. These are the ones that affect literally your adrenal system. You've got your SSRIs. These are the ones like Prozac and so on. You've got a whole raft of other pharmaceuticals which have serious, even deadly side effects, and they're what we currently use in terms of melatonin. Similar results show up for kids with aberrant behaviour and ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, which is what I would have been classified when I was much younger because of my level of activity. But coming into it, a 2020 study on aberrant behaviour, so we're talking quite physical aberrant tempers and stuff like that in this situation. 26 weeks, 6 to 15 years of age, 1 to 4 milligrams. And they saw a decrease in temper upon waking and improved sleep outcome. Now, when it comes to ADHD, there are many, dozens of studies on ADHD. And when they get to the studies looking at mice and rats and cellular studies, they see a definite link between ADHD and oxidation, inflammation, and mitochondrial dysfunction. This is the core, the key, the trigger of all of these conditions. So the great thing about melatonin is it gets into the mitochondria, it repairs the mitochondria, it's antioxidant, it's anti-inflammatory, and it has the benefits for the sleep cycle, cellular cycle, circadian rhythm approach. But in this 2009 study worth reporting, and remember, these date back even further than that, the average or the mean time was 3.7 years. So it was a really long period for a study. And they looked at 101 children. In that, 88% reported a decrease in sleep onset. In other words, speed to which they were able to get to sleep. 71% reported improved behaviour and 61% reported improved mood. But what's critical with this study, this long-term study, is, to quote, these are the exact words, no serious adverse events or treatment-related comorbidities. Now compare that to the pharmaceutical medications and you really do wonder why we're not using melatonin. In 2023, a study using 1 milligram with kids with ADHD. Remember, all of these studies I'm reporting in this video are kids studies, not adults, kids studies. So there's a huge number, there's even more to do with adults in all these situations, and they show similar results. So 1 milligram increased sleep duration and other sleep parameters and measures. In a 2024 study, they looked at ADHD kids and they found that they had decreased melatonin levels, and the lower the levels of melatonin were associated with the higher levels of ADHD behavior and sleep disturbances. So there was a clear link between all of those. In a 2024 study where they supplemented with melatonin, it increased sleep and it decreased the severity of ADHD symptoms. Again, reiterating, there are dozens and dozens of these studies saying pretty well the same information. When it comes to atopic dermatitis or allergic dermatitis, eczema, in a 2025 study on mice, now I normally report on kids, but this was young mice. More importantly, what it showed that the supplementing the mice with melatonin increased the microbiota on the skin, which produced a chemical called propionic acid. It's a short-chain fatty acid, and it's anti-inflammatory, it's anti-allergic, so to speak. So they were looking at the mechanism behind it. So simply by taking that in, now remember, this is one of many conditions here that show it seems to work in all of them. Isn't that amazing? So it produced the propionic acid, and as a result, it decreased the severity of the dermatitis. Now, in human studies, getting back to kids, in 2020, there was a supplementing with melatonin, decreased severity, decreased inflammation, the key cornerstone of it all, decreased IgE, which is a measure of allergies, and overall improved sleep, a win-win-win situation. A 2024 study, 6 weeks, not very long, really, when you're thinking about these conditions and they're lifelong, decreased severity and increased sleep, win situation. Now, when they looked at seizure disorders such as epilepsy, but not just epilepsy alone, they found 264 studies 264 studies specifically on epilepsy and seizures. And they found that decreased melatonin levels in the blood were associated with epilepsy, and during seizures, the level of melatonin went down even lower. So there was a direct link in there between melatonin levels and increase in lower melatonin, increase in seizures, lower melatonin, seizure actual events. And when supplemented with melatonin, it improved sleep latency, the time to get to sleep, so they got to sleep faster, and seizure severity. Overall, again, showing the same type of results in different conditions. When they looked at anxiety, and these were pre-operative, including dental here, I thought I'd put in brackets there, including dental, because I know how many kids are paranoid about going to the dentist. And they've shown overwhelmingly a decrease in pain, a decrease in anxiety, and a decrease in grogginess compared to other medications that they were using. A simple melatonin supplement that has all these other benefits and is what's called anti-anxiolytic. It actually helps lower anxiety in kids. And then pediatric intensive care and critically ill. Here we're talking cutting edge, life-saving stuff, and they're using melatonin. And when they supplemented with melatonin prior to, during the recovery period afterwards, they found a decrease in length of stay from 54 to 39 days. That is huge. That's 15 days that the kids weren't in hospital, which has heaps of benefits for the parents and the family and the kids, as well as for the hospital and the sheer cost of it all, simply by taking melatonin. And they also found a decrease in antipsychotic episodes and a decrease in delirium. Win-win situation. In a 2020 review of melatonin use in hospitals for newborn infants, neonates, they reported that it was being used in acute infections, respiratory distress syndrome, neurological injury, and jaundice. So this is a particularly vulnerable group, and of course, as you already know, they're already not producing melatonin and would be getting most of it from their mother's milk at the time. So again, an important use of melatonin in hospitals. And then migraines, to finish this all up. Studies on migraines have consistently shown a decreased pain proportional to the dose. The lower the dose, the lower the benefit. The higher the dose, 6, 8, 10 milligrams, the higher the benefit. A decrease in the frequency of attacks, increase in satisfaction with treatment, and when used in conjunction with the other medications, and this is quite common for melatonin, it's actually used in chemotherapy and a whole raft of other areas where it actually multiplies the actual benefits of those drugs. So in this case, it increases the effectiveness of the migraine meds and it decreases the side effects. And that's explainable because it's getting right in to the core basic metabolism of our cells, of our body, of everything that's going on there. That's why it is so effective. Now, finally, I've highlighted just some of the areas. Melatonin use is safe. It's used extensively in hospitals. It's used extensively around the world, not just for sleep, but all those other conditions that we see increasing. And as I've already explained, melatonin, our own production of melatonin, has been going down consistently as a result of the environment we live in, and of course, as you age too. So check it out. Make sure you subscribe to my channel, tick the boxes below and share this so other people, this is cutting edge information. But to finish up, we do have one on kids and guts and all, called Kids, Guts and All. If you want to know more about the gut health and kids, check out that video. But otherwise, these are some of the videos I've currently got up on melatonin, trying to highlight that it is safe and effective. Melatonin and Alzheimer's disease. Now that's not one you want to forget, bad joke. Acid reflux, another one that keeps coming back up. Tooth decay, polycystic ovarian syndrome, anti-aging, osteoporosis are just some of the videos I have on melatonin and the benefits of it. Just check it out, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.